Let's get into our message this morning. We are still going through the book of Judges and the just judges that we meet there. This group of people that don't always do the right thing, and we're about to get into one of a lot of people's favorites in this book. And one of the things you're going to notice today about chapter 6 is we're going to talk about a judge and a leader that God uses that doesn't, from his own perspective, come from the top. God has this incredible ability to lead with the least. Those who don't find themselves to be the biggest, oldest, strongest, smartest, most qualified, and God does this all the time. He's still doing it. It's one of my favorite things about God, how God is a God of the underdog. God uses underdogs. And he has done it whether you think about David and Goliath, whether you think about Gideon, which is who we're talking about today, or whether you talk about that little boy from Bethlehem who saved the entire world. God is a God who uses underdogs. And underdogs for us, we tend to love underdog stories, and I'm pretty sure this is why. It's part of our DNA, it's part of our story. We love a God who uses the people that can't do it on our own, and he's still doing it today. I don't know about you guys, but it provides me incredible comfort to know that God often uses people that are imperfect, a lot like me. And he's been doing it for centuries and centuries and centuries. So I hope when you read through this story, you see a little bit of yourself and are actually inspired. That God can actually lead with the least of these if we say, all right, God, you're in charge and I'm not. And so before we get into the Gideon story, I want to share with you guys a little bit of an underdog story to kind of put it in modern perspective for you guys. When I was back in law school, I had to participate in a competition, and it was called Moot Court. So you might have heard of mock trial. Mock trial is a great thing where you get people who are not in law yet. What they do is they'll come together and they'll play plaintiff and defendant and the jury and the judge, and they'll put on a trial and kind of get a sense of what that looks like. So moot court is that, but at the appeal level. So moot court is once they've had the trial and someone loses and they're upset and they appeal it, and then you argue it just in front of judges. You're no longer trying against each other. You're just arguing in front of judges. And so I went to law school, and you got to know I went to law school to be a tax attorney. The last place in the world I wanted to go is into a courtroom. I went to law school because I want to help people with wills and estates. My background is in accounting and numbers. I know as thrilling as that sounds, that's true. So I found myself in the first year, and they said, you've got to do this competition, Scott. And I was like, I don't want to do that competition. I just want to be a tax attorney. But I had to. And they said, all right, you have to do it because if you don't, you're not going to get your grade. So I was in the competition. They said, here's the thing. For all of you students who are performing in the competition, we're going to take the top 16, and you get to argue in front of actual judges. I was like, that's great, because that's not going to happen, so let's do this. So I did the competition. You had to do, like I said, in class. We argued, and then they posted the results. And I went to look at the results just because I was curious, and I saw that I had made it to number 17. Now, I was raised where I was told repeatedly that second place is the first loser. So when I saw that I said number 17, I was like, oh, perfect. That's exactly what I thought would happen. I didn't make it. I really wish I would have been like number 100 because that would have been easier to take, but fine. I'm number 17. I didn't make it. They can have a great time with that. About a week goes by, and I got a phone call. And it was a strange phone call because it didn't come in. At the time, I didn't have a cell phone. It actually came into my parents' house. Someone from the law school was desperately trying to get a hold of me. And I answered the phone. He said, hey, is this Scott? And I was like, yeah, who is this? And it was just this lady who I'd never met. And she says, so there's this girl in the competition, and she's lost her grandmother, so she has to travel to the Midwest. And she pauses. I was like, I'm really sorry to hear that. I'll pray for her. And it just kind of awkward. And she goes, so you're in? It's like, what do you mean I'm in? She's like, well, you're the alternate. I was like, no one told me I was the alternate. I just knew I was number 17. And like, well, we're going to have you go to the competition. I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So the other thing you should know is that when we had to do the competition in class, there was 2 issues in every case. 2 issues, and I had a partner. So all I had to know was 1 issue, 1 side. Sweet 16, you got to know both issues, both sides. No partner. You're on your own now. And I now had less than a week to figure it out. So one of the reasons I think God does this underdog thing is he knows that we tend to rally around underdogs. It didn't take long to my fellow very competitive law students to figure out that the loser had now been invited to the party. So I showed up very quickly, and I'll never forget some of the people in my class that sat around a table with me. They said, all right, Hinsche, you're in. We got to teach you the other issue and the other side of both issues. And I'm talking law students here, folks. And they gave of their time and their hearts and their knowledge. And they said, all right, Scott, you've got less than a week to get ready. Let's get you ready. And they did. They helped me more than I ever could have done on my own. And so then the weekend comes and I find myself in LA Superior Court to do this competition. So at this point, remember, I'm the first loser and I feel like I don't belong, okay? But I am so excited just to have this chance. I'm just grateful. I don't even have a lot of butterflies. I'm just like, I don't belong here. And I showed up, did the competition, and God's got a great sense of humor because I beat the other person. And I still don't know how. So now I'm at round 16, I'm into round 8, we're still in LA Superior Court, we do it again the very same day, I argue, they argue, and God allowed me to win again. At this point, I barely know where I am. Like, I am so shocked that all this is going on. I'm now told that the very next weekend, we're arguing at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in Pasadena, a beautiful, gorgeous old building in Pasadena, and actual Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judges are going to be our judges. And remember, I'm still number 17, the loser that doesn't belong there. Okay? So at this point, everything is a win, everything is a plus, everything is a green light. I don't deserve any of this. And I showed up, I remember my parents went with me, we went out there and I argued in front of nine appellate court judges. I can't tell you guys the feeling I had inside me, how grateful I was that the one who didn't belong got to do this. And God again had a sense of humor, and I made it out of the semifinals into the finals. And I'm like, this is insane. I should be on my couch right now. Like, what is going on? And I'm proud to report to you guys that in the finals, I was beat. I lost. And very appropriately so. If you guys have ever been in a competition where someone beats you and you're like, oh, I should have had that one. This was not that. Eugene Kim beat me, and he deserved every single bit of it. He's still a very successful trial attorney down the valley. But I am telling you guys, when I went through that competition, and I had that opportunity as an underdog who didn't qualify, I realized something about these underdog stories. When you've got nothing to lose, you have everything to win. I didn't deserve to be there in the first place. It was completely and totally a gift from God. And because I had nothing to lose, I wasn't nearly as nervous, and I was grateful every single step. I was grateful when I lost, because I shouldn't have been there in the first place, and the guy who won deserved to win. I learned something, that when this happens, we have only one person that we can give credit to, and it's not us. It's God. God got all praise and credit and glory because He did it and I didn't. And I think that's why He's still using underdog stories today. And I think that's why He did it here with Gideon. So if you can turn to Judges 6, we're going to take a look. We're going to look at Gideon for a couple weeks, by the way, at what happens here with brother Gideon. The Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian 7 years. The hand of Midian prevailed over Israel, and because of Midian, the Israelites provided for themselves hiding places in the mountains, caves, and strongholds. For whenever the Israelites put in seed, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. They would encamp against them and destroy the produce of the land, as far as the neighborhood of Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, and no sheep, or ox, or donkey. For they and their livestock would come up, and they would even bring their tents as thick as locusts. Neither they nor their camels could be counted. So they wasted the lands as they came in. Thus Israel was greatly impoverished because of Midian. And the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. So you'll notice here in chapter 6, we zoom in a little bit, and we get some of the details on how the Israelites are suffering. And one of the things that I have learned over the course of my life is that the world is full of Midianites. Here you've got this group of people, and it's not just enough that they keep the Israelites down. They take everything they can possibly have. Every time they put in seed, they destroy it. It's not enough that they're number 2. They have to be like at the lowest of the low. And the world is still full of these folks. For me, his name was Shane. I want to share a story with you guys. Back before bullying was talked about as much as it was today, I want to share a story with you guys of the first, only, and last fight I ever got into. And I was at the very mature age of 5. And the guy's name was Shane. Shane was literally, he was like the school bully before everyone was talking about bullying. And one of the things Shane liked to do was pick on this guy. I'm pretty sure Shane was 6, I was only 5, and he loved to make fun of me. Now, one of the things you guys should know about me is I am more protective of those around me than I am of me. It's just the way I've always been. If you're close to me, I will protect you before I protect me. So it was one thing for him to make fun of me, but one day, Shane went after my mom. So we're out in the playground, and Shane made a pretty nasty comment that I can't today tell you what he said, but it was about my mom, and that wasn't okay. So I did what every mature 5-year-old would do, and I pushed him. And I pushed Shane, because you don't make fun of my mom, and Shane hit me so hard. Right here in the stomach. Knocked the wind out of me. I doubled over, hit the ground. I'm pretty sure there was tears. I know you guys are all really impressed. Bell rang. Everyone, I think a teacher had to come get me and pick me up and take me inside. And I learned that day that that's not the appropriate way to handle the Midianites and the Shanes. You don't push them. It's not going to fix anything, right? But they're out there. And they're still out there. Here's the thing, though. God's going to take care of them. My push didn't do it. I don't know what's going on with Shane now. It doesn't really, frankly, matter. But I know that God is going to take care of him and any other person that might come specifically against God and the Lord Jesus Christ. And so I have questions for you guys today as you think through these things. Do you trust God with your enemies, your Midianites, your Shanes? Or are you waiting for, say, that one more thing, and you're going to do something to push back, to push them away, to fight back? One of the things we learn from this story and many other stories in the Bible is that we're not supposed to do that. We actually say, God, I trust you with my enemies. I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm not going to try to fight back. You take care of that. So when you're in that situation and Shane's up in your face, the Midianites are taking everything you've got, don't fight back. Cry out. Don't fight back, cry out. I should never have pushed Shane that day. I should have hit my knees for a very different reason. Not because I got socked in the stomach, because I should have been praying, God, you help me with Shane. You help Shane. Because his issue with me isn't me. There's something else going on inside of him. Don't fight back, cry out. Let's look at the next few verses. When the Israelites cried to the Lord on account of the Midianites, the Lord sent a prophet to the Israelites, and he said to them, Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery. And I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you, and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not pay reverence to the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you live. But you have not given heed to my voice. I love what this messenger comes and says. And I'm paraphrasing here a little bit. But what the messenger says is, look, I'm coming to you, I'm speaking on behalf of God. And God said, I've saved you before. I am fully capable of saving you again, but you're looking to someone else to save you. God's like, I'm in the business of saving you. Have you forgotten the story that I have with your people? I'm capable of saving you, but you're not looking to me to be saved. You're looking to other stuff, other gods, your circumstances, your situation. So again, I got another question for you guys. So what other saviors are you looking? We live in an age where it might not be a statue in your house or on your corner, right? But it can be just as easy for us to look to something else to save us. A spouse, a parent, a child, a friend, a job. What is it that you're looking to make you ultimately happy and satisfied and fulfilled to fix it? Because if it's not God, it will let you down. I can promise you that. God's fully capable of saving us. He's been doing it for generations. Look only to Him. And the prophet says very specifically, you have not given heed to my voice. In other words, you're not listening. Are you listening to God? Is there something that God has been saying for you to do that you should do? Is there something that God has been saying for you not to do that you should not do? Sometimes God can be remarkably loud and direct and obvious, and sometimes He can speak to us through people, and sometimes He's very quiet, and it's like a whisper, it's an idea. Sometimes it comes once, and sometimes it comes repeatedly because He's really, really patient. And if He really wants to get your attention, are you listening to what God wants you to do? I want you to notice something. God's people are constantly calling out to God. They're crying out to God, do this, do this, do this. And He's saying, are you going to participate in the dance? Are you going to do this with me? Are you looking to me? Are you listening to me? Look at the next few verses. Now the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, and as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty warrior." Gideon answered him, "But sir, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all His wonderful deeds that our ancestors recounted to us, saying, 'Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has cast us off and given us into the hand of Midian." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours and deliver Israel from the hand of Midian. I hereby commission you." He responded, "But sir, how can I deliver Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family." The Lord said to him, "But I will be with you, and you shall strike down the Midianites, every one of them." So you got to picture Gideon here. Okay, he's out beating out wheat in the winepress. He's doing it on the sly. He's doing it in an area where he normally wouldn't be doing it because he doesn't want those crazy Midianites to come and take it, right? So he's already doing something like a covert operation, and this angel just shows up. This would be a little bit shocking. Probably would have spooked him a little bit. And this angel comes and is very encouraging and complimentary to start. It says, Gideon refers to him as a mighty warrior. That's what Gideon means. It says, "Oh, mighty warrior." So he encourages Gideon, he lifts him up, and then Gideon doesn't even look like he's scared. He boldly looks at this angel and says, "But sir, if the Lord's with us, why has all this happened to us? Why am I beating out wheat in a winepress if God's with us? You tell me God's with us, but look around you. Does it look like God's with us?" He's saying, why me? Why us? If you're in here today, and you're in a time of your life, or you've been in a time of your life where you're wondering, "God, I believe in you, I love you, but I'm not feeling you," there is room in this book for you. There are people who have had this situation and said, "God, why me? You say that if I follow you, you'll be with me, but I'm not feeling it, I'm not seeing it." It's okay for you to call out to God and say, "God, why me?" He would far rather you say it to Him than don't and abandon Him. You can say, "God, why me?" But pay attention to how God responds when you say that. The next thing He says is this: "God, where you been?" He says, "And where are all His wonderful deeds that our ancestors recounted to us?" If you remember, we talked about whose fault it was, right? Whether it was the older generation or the younger generation didn't know. Here it says that the older generation actually told him, "We believe in this God, and this God has done all these amazing things for us." And Gideon's like, "So I've heard about you, God, but I'm not seeing you. Where have you been?" It is okay to cry out to God and say, "God, I love you, I believe in you, I'm talking to you, but I'm struggling with seeing why this stuff is happening to me." But again, pay attention to how God and this angel responds. One thing that's fascinating is how the angel doesn't deny when Gideon says, "But now the Lord has cast us off." The angel doesn't say, "Nuh-uh, God's right here." He doesn't deny it at all. What he says is fascinating. He says, "Gideon, you go. You deliver. I hereby commission you. So check this out. Gideon is literally firing these shots at God through this angel, and God says, I am going to use you. Don't be surprised if God's answer to your question involves you doing something. If you call out to God and say, why me? Why is this happening? Why won't you fix this? And God says, why don't you fix this? Why don't you go? You can do this, you least of these. If I am with you, I hereby commission you. I've seen this happen in my own life. God, why are you using me? I've seen this happen in churches. I remember going to a large church, and I said, you guys don't have a young adults group? I'm a young adult. How do we make that happen? They said, you want to lead it? Like, no! I don't lead anything. I'm not qualified to lead. Why are you even asking me that? And it was literally a path that God used to get me here. I didn't know it at the time. God does it. Churches do it. You want to do it? You can lead it. I commission you. You've got a heart for it. And yes, of course, we're supposed to decide whether or not someone is capable of doing it. But God says, I'm going to use you. I will be with you. So as you guys think about this, and I've asked you questions like, are you looking to another Savior? Are you listening to God? Is there something that you think God has been asking you to do? To deliver yourself, to fix this situation? Is there something God has been saying, I want you to do, that He's been calling you to do? Think about that. And not just when we're in here, just think about it today, think about it this week. Is there something that God has been asking you to do as part of this plan to work through you in this life? And don't forget verse 16. God says, but I will be with you. Gideon, don't focus on the fact that you're the least and the youngest. In other words, he says, don't focus on your weakness. Focus on God's strength. Whatever it is that you're going through, don't focus on what you cannot do. Focus on what God can do. Don't focus on how unqualified you are. Focus on how qualified your God is, and there you will find the motivation to keep going. Verses 17 to 24. Then he said to him, if now I have found favor with you, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. Do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you. And he said, I will stay until you return. So Gideon went into his house and prepared a kid and unleavened cakes from an ephah of flour. The meat he put in a basket, and the broth he put in a pot, and brought them to him under the oak and presented them. The angel of God said to him, take the meat and the unleavened cakes and put them on this rock and pour out the broth. And he did so. Then the angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes. And the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. Then Gideon perceived that it was the angel of the Lord. And Gideon said, help me, Lord God, for I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, peace be to you. Do not fear. You shall not die. Then Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it, the Lord is peace. To this day it still stands at Ophrah, which belongs to the Abiezrites. Don't be afraid to ask God for a sign. Gideon's a little bold here. I hope you're noticing how bold Gideon is. He's like, I want to make sure that you, angel, are representative of God. So I'm going to ask you for a sign, but first, I'm going to go get something for you. Did you notice that? He's like, angel, I want a sign from you, but I'm going to go get a present for you. It's okay to ask God for a sign, but don't be surprised if it involves you giving up something. You ask God for something, don't be surprised if he pushes back. He's like, okay, but I'm going to need a little something from you. And Gideon goes and he gets the kid, he gets the soup, he gets all this stuff. He makes this really elaborate meal, and then poof. Right? Picture this. He's made this whole elaborate thing for the angel, and the angel just torches it. Gideon's like, what? I made all this for what? Right? But man, if I saw this happen, I'm like, clearly, you're a representative of God, because you just turned that whole meal in the flambe, it is gone, right? God doesn't want the thing. He didn't want the soup. He didn't want the kid. He wants your attention. He doesn't need our stuff. He doesn't need anything from me. I can't give something to God that He doesn't already have. He wants my attention. He wants to know, am I willing to give to Him? Am I willing to put in as part of this dance, this operation that He has through me, in this life? And so, you can ask God for a sign. You can ask God questions, but don't be afraid when He says, all right, what are you going to give to me? Do I have your attention? And at this point, we know He's got Gideon's attention. And then God speaks to him. He says, I don't want you to be afraid. And so Gideon is not afraid. And he says a beautiful thing in Hebrew. He says, Yahweh Shalom. Yahweh Shalom. And it just means simply God is peace. And so he builds this altar here, constructs this thing, and says, all right, this is a remembrance that God is peace. That in this world of pain and conflict and inadequacy, God is peace. Nothing else here is going to give us this peace. Only God. Yahweh Shalom. Next few verses, 25 to 27. That night the Lord said to him, take your father's bull, the second bull, 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal that belongs to your father, and cut down the sacred pole that's beside it, and build an altar to the Lord your God on top of the stronghold there in proper order. Then take the second bull and offer it as a burnt offering with the wood of the sacred pole that you shall cut down. So Gideon took 10 of his servants and did as the Lord had told him. But because he was too afraid of his family and the townspeople to do it by day, he did it by night. So I just kind of picture God here. He's like, all right, so you at peace now? Now I want you to do something. And I want you to take a bull and I want you to take down that statue of Baal, that false god. Yes, it belongs to your dad on your property, but it is wrong. And I want you to pull it down. And that Asherah pole that you're using to worship that false god, that has to come down too. You at peace now? Good. Now I want you to do something for me. And Gideon does it. He's a little scared, so he doesn't do it during the day. He waits till nighttime, and he does this. And the reason God wants him to do this is that God wants to be top priority for the Israelites, for Gideon, for me, and for you. And as part of this is, I want you to get rid of anything that's number one. Just get rid of it. I don't want it to be a temptation for you. I want it to be very clear that it is not your number one. And the same message goes to us today. And again, it's harder. Because I don't know about you guys, I don't have any false god statues around. I don't have any Asherah poles around. But to me, that sometimes makes it harder, even more deceptive for those other things to come in and to take most of our time and our attention. God says, I want to be top priority. Anything else that's number one, it needs to go. And so Gideon does this, albeit at night, and then this happens the following morning. When the townspeople rose early in the morning, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the sacred pole beside it was cut down, and the second bull was offered on the altar that had been built. So they said to one another, who has done this? After searching and inquiring, they were told, Gideon, son of Joash, did it. Then the townspeople said to Joash, bring out your son, so that he may die. For he has pulled down the altar of Baal and cut down the sacred pole beside it. But Joash said to all who were arrayed against him, will you contend for Baal? Or will you defend his cause? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he is a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been pulled down. Therefore, on that day, Gideon was called Jerubbaal. That is to say, let Baal contend against him, because he pulled down his altar. So Gideon does what he did at night. In the morning, they wake up, and I'm sure after they have their morning coffee, right, they look out, like, hey, where's that false god statue that we had yesterday? It's been completely pulled down. There's been a sacrifice made, clearly not to the statue, and they are mad. They are so mad, they're ready to take the perpetrator's life. That's mad. Why? Because people get really upset when you expose their idols. Trust me on this one. When you expose that someone has a number one and it is not God, people get really, really upset. And they're incredibly upset. So much so that the life of Gideon is apparently more important to them than a statue and a wooden pole. But then you gotta love Dad. I want to be a Joash kind of a dad. He swoops in and he says, really? Are you going to contend for Baal? Will you contend for the false god? Are you going to defend his cause? Whoever contends for him shall be put to death by morning. If he's a god, let him contend for himself, because his altar has been pulled down. I picture him making the spiel. I picture him just dropping a mic like, anything else to say? You come after my son? You are going to be the one who loses your life in the morning. And as part of this, Gideon gets a whole new name. Jerubbaal. Contender with Baal. That here Gideon successfully pushed back on Baal. And what did Baal do? Nothing. And that's what's so brilliant about what his dad said. He said, look, your issue, guys, it's not with my son. Your problem is not with Gideon. Look around you, all the stuff that's happening, all the nonsense with the Midianites, Baal is not fixing any of this. Your problem's not with my son. Your problem is with Baal. If he's real, let him put his statue back up again. Are you really trying to align yourself with Baal, or do you want someone else? He brilliantly identifies who their new defendant, who their problem is, who their complaint is against. He's like, it's not my kid. It's against your false god. Next few verses. Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east came together. And crossing the Jordan, they encamped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord took possession of Gideon, and he sounded the trumpet. And the Abiezrites were called out to follow him. He sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they too were called out to follow him. He also sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they went up to meet them. So just like that, the least of these, who does what God told him to do in the middle of the night, has a bunch of people rallying around him. Not because he did everything perfectly, not because he had no doubt, not because he was the strongest, smartest, most capable, oldest, but because he was following God. It's amazing how people will rally around the least of the leaders who are following God. Not because they're capable on their own doing it, but because they're following a God who can absolutely do it. We're going to keep going through this story next week. I'm going to invite up Elder Ray Knuth to share communion introduction and prayer with you guys, and then we'll take communion right after that.